If I am honest, Runescape setting menu is a hot mess. While Jagex has tried to make changes to the settings menu, it is still extremely difficult to navigate and to find the setting you want to toggle. Even worse, there are some settings which can be super helpful for many players, but they do not even know that they exist. Today, we'll be looking at 7 settings that you might find useful. I won't be ranking them by importance. Instead, we'll be taking the path of least resistance and following the in-game setting interface order. That way, you can easily join along and make these changes for yourself. Number 1. Walk Marker. Walk Marker is this large yellow arrow that appears when you click where you want to walk. This large yellow arrow may be useful for some players to see which tile your character will move to, but for other players, it may be a hindrance and an eyesore. The good news is regardless of whether you like or dislike the walk marker, you are able to turn it on or off depending on your preference. Walk marker options are available on interface game interaction. Number 2. Slayer Counter. If you are a veteran player, you might have the experience of AFK a Slayer task, then realizing you have completed the set Slayer task 20 minutes ago, and just slaughtering these poor innocent chickens for no good reason. Well, gone are the days from when you need a Slayer gem or NPC contact to figure out how many monsters are left on your Slayer task. In these settings, there is a toggle to show the Slayer task counter on your interface so you will never miss completing your Slayer task again. To toggle Slayer counter, go into interfaces and it can be found under information windows. Number 3. Revolution size. There are a lot of settings for combat. Going through all the ones you may want to keep an eye out for may require a separate video. In this video, I will hopefully just highlight the ones that is relevant to most players, and I believe most players use some form of revolution. Even the most hardcore PVMers will turn on revolution when slaying or AFKing something. When you turn on revolution, it will automatically fire the first 9 abilities on your ability bar when you are in combat. However, did you know that you could change the number of abilities in the settings? Rather than 9, you can have anywhere from 1 to 14. This is useful in 2 ways. First, you might have abilities like bleeds on your bar, but you don't want revolution to fire bleeds automatically because you are a pro gamer and want to activate bleed abilities yourself. Rather than having to move bleed abilities to the end, you can just reduce the revolution size from 9 to something like 4. Second, if you are like me, you might have a bunch of crap at the start of your bar. I sometimes like putting skinning stuff at the front of my bar for when I am making potions or other things. At the same time, I use the same bar for AFK Slayer. Rather than having to shuffle my bar every time I move from skilling to Slayer, I just extend the revolution bar size to 14 so I can add combat abilities to the end of my bar while keeping my skilling shortcuts at the front. Number 4. Action Bar Binding. Under the Combat and Action Bar setting is a section called Action Bar Binding. Action Bar Binding allows you to bind your action bar to different weapon styles. For example, if your Action Bar 1 is your Mage bar, you can bind Action Bar 1 to magic so that when you put on any magic weapon, for example your staff, your action bar will automatically switch. Not only can you bind to a specific style, you can also bind to dual wield or two-hand or any. This allows you to automatically switch to different action bars if you have a separate action bar for dual wield and a separate action bar for two-hand. This setting goes even further by allowing you to not only automatically switch your main action bar, but also bind any additional action bar to also switch depending on your weapon. This setting is super useful and a great quality of life for any type of combat. Number 5. Hide familiar options. Within combat and action bar, you also have a section called attack options. In here, there is the checkbox for hide familiar options. Checking this option means you can no longer interact with the familiar in the overworld. When you try to click your familiar, it will be as if they are not there. Instead, you will need to make use of the familiar interface or the familiar icon on your action bar to interact with your follower. Some of you might be asking why you would want to toggle this option. It seems to make things less convenient. Well, it can be super helpful in many situations, especially if you have a fairly large familiar. For example, when you are PVMing, you might have to click around to try to dodge mechanics or to reposition yourself. The last thing you want to do is to accidentally click on your familiar instead of the ground, and a mistake like that could get you killed. If you have tried to dodge a Rax or swipe attack, you will know what I am talking about. Besides bossing, you might have scenarios where you are banking or just running around where you accidentally click your familiar, which is a nuisance. So for many players, hiding familiar option is the preferred option. Number 6. Target with bladed dive. On a similar note of accidentally clicking the wrong thing, have you ever tried to bladed dive somewhere and you get a message saying you cannot attack that NPC? Well, that's because you tried to bladed dive to a non-attackable target. This could be a piece of scenery like a blade of grass, or it could be part of a boss mechanic like the Talos fonts, or it could even be your own familiar. Having your bladed dive cancelled because there was a random object on the ground where you wanted to dive to can be very frustrating. Luckily, Jagex has now put in a setting option that can help. Under Combat and Action Bar and the section Targeting, there is the setting Target Scenery with Targeted Movement Abilities. Unchecking this means you can no longer accidentally bladed dive to a piece of the scenery. This setting also works for the ability Dive. Having this setting unticked should make it much easier to dive your way around Runescape. Number 7. Target Cycle. The last setting we'll be looking at may be kind of a cheat as it's more of a keybind rather than a setting. However, since Jagex has put target cycling as an option in the gameplay settings, I am including this. Target cycling allows you to shift between combat targets with a single keybind rather than needing to click monsters with a mouse. This can be a great help in multiple ways. First, some monster hitboxes in RuneScape is incredibly janky. When you try to attack a monster, you might misclick the hitbox and instead of attacking, your character will end up walking next to the monster. Second, target cycling means you do not have to look at your screen. If you are AFKing while watching a movie, you can just press the target cycle key and a ability key to initiate combat. Third, target cycling can help you find targets in a crowded environment. If you have ever done the Infernal Star Wilderness Flash event, you may have experienced the difficulty of finding Pyrofiends to kill, with all the graphics and abilities of everybody else also trying to kill Pyrofiends. In this scenario, you can just use target cycle rather than use your mouse to try to find a valid target. Target cycle settings can be found under Combat and Action Bar under the section Targeting. Here, there are 3 options: Cycle Target Forward, Cycle Target Backward, and Direct Targeting. For the purpose of this video, you will only need to keybind the first one, Cycle Target Forward. There are other uses for the other 2 options, but the difference they offer is very niche, so you do not need to worry about them for the moment. Those are the 7 settings that you might find useful in your gameplay. Hopefully you found this guide useful. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you next time.